Like what we're doing here at Cube4two? Click the like and subscribe button to let us know. Also, Cube4two is now a TCG Player affiliate. Click the link in the show notes for all your shopping needs to help support the channel. Alright guys, let's get started. What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt, and we have a lot to talk about this week. We've got a question to answer. It's really in-depth. This is actually going to be a two-part video, and hang around to the end because I'm going to be giving away a cube. But before any of that, let's get to our question. Hey Matt, I just got the new starter cube from Card Kingdom, and I'm looking for ideas to upgrade it. Any obvious first steps? So this question was posted on Reddit weeks ago, and pretty much no one replied to my boy CBS. And so I'm going to give you some pro tips for asking these kind of questions really quick on Reddit or wherever you ask them. And one is you need to be clear with your goals, you need to be clear with your budget, and you need to be clear about the long-term goals for your cube. So CBS and I started messaging back and forth because I really wanted to help him. I thought it was a very legitimate question. And then I realized I could help other people too upgrade their Card Kingdom starter cubes and give them a path for moving forward, assuming they want to move in the same direction as my boy CBS. So I started talking to him about his goals. Goals are really important when you're upgrading a cube. What's your budget? Where do you want your cube to be over time? Is it going to be traditional unpowered? Is it going to be a low power cube? And so I talked to CBS, and these are his goals. He wants to push a $50 to $70 budget for this first upgrade. And then he wants to upgrade over time. Lastly, he does want to turn this cube into a traditional unpowered cube, which is really going to push it over time. And then lastly, I added one goal for myself as I tried to help him, and that was we're going to try to avoid middle of the road cards. And what those are cards that we add in during an upgrade and then end up having to cut later, which is going to be difficult. I actually had to compromise a couple of times, but I'll point those out to you as we talk about his cube. So that being said, let's talk about the pros of the Card Kingdom starter cube, because as I got to looking at it, I realized this is a really well constructed cube. This cube is really well designed. It seems like every card, even if it's not super powerful, fits into its themes and its archetypes. For example, let me show you a card that looks janky but actually fits well into this cube, and that's Master Trinketeer. Master Trinketeer is an aggressively statted 3/2 for 3. It boosts servos and thopters, and it's a dwarf, and it makes servos. So this cube supports tokens, in case you can't tell, white aggro, and dwarf tribal. So suddenly Master Trinketeer is like this card jack of all trades fitting into 3 archetypes. So I do have to give the guys at Card Kingdom credit. The cube is intricately designed. There are a handful of staples in each color. There's a few cards in every color that will never need to be changed. There aren't a ton of them, but there's a few in each colors, and that's always an upside. And then lastly, I like that the guild cards are guidepost cards. And what that means is you can look at the guilds to tell what each color pair is supposed to do. Now, there are some cons to this cube, and one of the main cons is there are bad sub-themes. For example, Dwarf Tribal. Yeah, Dwarf Tribal. That's a overpowered. Whoo! Don't you remember all the tournaments that Dwarf Tribal won? So, not a great sub-theme. And there are some suboptimal cards. Cards that just aren't great that could be easily upgraded. A good example of this is Geist Flame. Geist Flame is 1 red, deal 1 damage to a creature or player, and you can flash it back for 4. This Lightning Bolt, this card is not, okay? So we're running some suboptimal cards inside this cube. And then lastly, we're running some inefficient or overcosted effects. Things that are happening at 5, 6, 7, 8 mana that should be happening for 3, 4, 5 mana. And then lastly, we're running some cards that are just bad. You know, for example, Warden of the Chained. For 1 in Gruul, you get a 4/4 trampler that can't attack unless you have another 4 power creature. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to curve into my turn 3 threat, with a Landwar Elf and not be able to swing with it. That sounds fantastic. I need to have another giant creature on the board to make him any good at all. Yeah, not the best. So we are running just some bad cards. So let's talk about the cube and how we're going to go about upgrading it. Now, our boy CBS said between $50 and $70 for this upgrade, so I'm going to try and split the difference and land as close to $60 as possible, which means I can't cut everything, I can't include cards that mess with the budget, and I'm not going to cut cards that are supporting an archetype that I'm not trying to weaken. So in some cases, if you look back through the cube list at the end of this video, you're going to notice that we are definitely still playing some suboptimal cards. This is just a first jump where we're trying to get as much bang for our buck as possible. So let's get started with white. The Card Kingdom Starter Cube supports White Weenie, and they do it with a suite of cards like these. Toolcraft Exemplar is a dwarf. Yay, dwarf artifact, tribal. Gear Shift Ace is meant to support dwarf vehicles, which is a sub-theme in the cube. Loyal Sentry is a blocker for control decks. You know, you get that death touch when he blocks. Countless Gears Renegade is a token generator / aggressive creature, I guess. And the Aether Geode Miner is able to swing in as a 3/1 because you can use the energy that he generates to flicker him to help keep him safe. We're going to upgrade the back row pretty easily. We're just going to turn them all into solid 1-mana, 1-drop 2/1s, right? Savannah Lion-esque creatures. Sky Marcher is fine, and sometimes she does get to fly if she comes at the end of the game. Dauntless Bodyguard is just a cube staple. He's a great 1-drop. Venerable Knight is a glorified Savannah Lions, but we're working on a budget, kids. We're going to upgrade the Countless Renegade, which is a token generator, into Precinct Captain, which is also a token generator, but is able to swing in on turn 3 via First Strike. And we're going to turn our Geode Miner dude into a Danto Vanguard, who doesn't have to flicker and is capable of saving himself more than once by virtue of paying the 4 life. So all of this is just a solid upgrade to the aggro suite in the 1 and 2 mana slots. Now, as we drift up the curve, we're going to see a little overlap. We still have aggressive creatures, but we also have some token stuff happening too, including a very overpriced effect at 4 mana with creature tokens you control get +1/+1 on Phantom General. That card is just way overcosted for that effect. So we're going to upgrade all of these pretty simply to help our aggro suite. We're going to turn the Trinketeer into Thalia Heretic Cathar. We're going to turn the Pious Evangel into Kinjali Sunwing, which will also slow down our opponent and give us an evasive attacker. And then rather than buffing all of our 1/1s, Leonin Warleader is just gonna let us go super wide, making cats every time he turns sideways. And again, what I like about these upgrades is they're not coming out anytime soon. Now, I did mention that there's a Flicker sub-theme going on inside this cube, and they're running a couple cards, I guess, to help support it, and that's the Arishan Cleric and the Irregular Cohort. Both of these cards are Flicker targets. You're gonna want to flicker them to help generate value. But we're going to kind of cut these cards and run the better flicker cards that we can. So I know we're going to cut these targets. There's plenty of other things to flicker inside of the cube. Instead, we're going to turn them into Charming Prince and Restoration Angel. Now, if you watch the channel, you know I'm not a big fan of the Charming Prince. I'm just not. But he is a flicker target, and he's able to flicker stuff himself. So he does all the things. And Restoration Angel is just a cube staple going way back. Flash is wonderful, and yes, she flickers as well. So solid cards here. Again, not a huge fan of the Charming Prince, but if you're keeping the flicker sub-theme that's in Azurius, you leave him in to help support that. Now, there are some other cards missing from this cube, mainly control cards. There's no legit control deck inside this cube. And so I looked at the cards that I felt like weren't really pulling their weight, and we're going to turn them into a control deck. The big problem with upgrading on a budget is that you're gonna miss some of the best board wipes. That's why they're playing Planar Cleansing, for an example, which is just that card sucks, and it's not very castable at triple white either. So we have a 6-mana white wipe for triple white, just ugh. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut Imposter and Angelic Renewal and Planar Cleansing and try and add in a couple of board wipes and maybe that blocker that we cut way back in the 1-drop slot, that Loyalist, yeah, he's gone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to play Wall of Omens, Shatter the Sky, and Fumigate. Wall of Omens is a staple and a flicker target. That helps us there. Shatter the Sky is recently from Theros, and the card is very, very playable. Having Shatter the Sky in your cube is going to be fine. I play it as a 3rd board wipe in white, and it's doing great. Fumigate is a compromise. You want your Wraths to be at 4 mana, but we're on a budget, and Wrath of God blows the budget, so we're not doing that. but we still need a second board wipe for density, and Fumigate is serviceable. You're not going to have to cut it anytime soon, but you are eventually going to cut it for Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, Settle the Wreckage, those options. So we're going to play Fumigate because of budget, but it's not a bad card, especially at the cube's power level right now, and it is infinitely more castable than Planar Cleansing. Now, there are some other cards in white that we want to upgrade, most of it in the removal package. Disenchant, meh. Mighty Leap is a combat trick, and Phalanx Tactics is a combat trick, and combat tricks just aren't great in cube. Now, I want to upgrade the removal package. This will help the control deck, and this will help the aggressive decks. Now, we don't get cards like Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, but we can play all the O-Ring variants, which are very serviceable. Oblivion Ring himself, cast out with Cycling, which is something we'll talk more about later, and then even Conclave Tribunal is good for those aggro and token decks. It's like a removal spell just for them. These exile permanents, which are really flexible, you are going to want to add Swords and Path later, and maybe Conclave Tribunal comes out, but there is nothing wrong with this removal package as it is, especially at this cube's power level. Now, as a little spice, the cube does play Saram's Expertise, which is a token generator, but Planeswalkers are noticeably absent inside this cube. And so I thought where we could, we would try and squeeze in a budget but still very relevant Planeswalker. And so for this cube, I managed to make room for that in white with a Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants. This is going to be fantastic for our aggressive decks as a curve topper. He's going to do +1/+1 counters on up to 2 creatures. That's really good for our token decks. He's going to let us get a creature out of the yard, and his emblem is game winning if we ever get to it. So that's going to be the entirety of our upgrades in white. And so far on budget, we've only spent
$8.78. That's right, Cubers. It's your boy Daniel.
Kid, what are you doing here? This is my video. We're in a hurry. We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Okay, well, I wanted to help, and I wanted to help give away a Cube Chew.
Alright, fine, kid. You can help. We'll find some spots for you, okay?
Sweet.
This is going to take us to blue, and blue is clearly trying to support this tempo deck, but there's not a lot of consistency for the deck either. So we're going to try and add some consistency, think about our control deck, and make the blue tempo deck a little better. They're running cards like Passwall Adept, which can't be blocked, the Sigiled Starfish, which I guess is for control decks, and the Lynx to tap down your stuff, another tempo creature, and a Spells Matter card with Surukur the Spellblade. We're going to cut all of this. Instead, we're going to play Warkite Marauder, Looter Ilkor, and Exclusion Mage, which are all better for our tempo package, and Nadir Kraken, which is better for our spells deck because now they can just play spells that let them draw cards and create tokens. It's also solid in our tempo deck, and I've even used it as a ham sandwich style finisher in a control deck, so yeah, Nadir Kraken, he does all the things. So that's part of our tempo package upgrade. They're also running cards like Allurios Enraptured, I guess, and Kefnet's Last Word, and Sphinx of Uthun. I'm not thrilled with these cards. I'm not a fan of Allurios, and I want to help out the Spellsy deck since I did just cut one of their payoffs. Kefnet's Last Word is a really bad control magic, and I guess Sphinx is supposed to be the control finisher, but too much mana, not enough bang for your buck. I don't like him, so we're going to cut all of this, and instead we're going to play Murmuring Mystic for the spells. Oh, we're just going to play control magic. Yeah, we'll just play control magic. Card's super affordable. And then we don't have to stay tapped down for a turn after we cast it. And then Dream Eater is a house. Entering, bouncing something, surveilling 4 helps the graveyard decks. This card does all the things. I love me some Dream Eater. We are spending a little more money. As silly as it sounds, those nickels add up on the Dream Eater, but he's so good at being an efficient closer, and he's not going to have to come out when you upgrade the cube later. My big complaint in blue is efficiency and consistency. They're running a lot of overcosted effects. Cards like Admiral's Orders are a good example of this because you only get to the cost reduction if you attack. I mean, it's good for the tempo deck, but it's not good for the other decks. Reign of Revelation is a 4-mana draw spell, and I'm just not interested in living that life. And then Combat Tricks again. So what blue really wants is counterspell and card draw effects. So we're going to go really deep on those. We're going to play cards like Hieroglyphic Illumination, Supreme Will, Thassa's Intervention, and Memory Lapse as our first soft counter in this cube. Now, I know I just said I don't like 4-mana card draw spells, and that's not what Hieroglyphic Illumination is.
Don't be afraid to just cycle it away.
Absolutely. In the early game, you're just going to pay a blue and cycle this card away. You're not going to hold it and try and get the 4 mana draw 2 out of it. Just cycling it away in the early game is fine for decks. And then late game, if you top deck it, then you can cast it on your opponent's instep to draw cards. And you know what's great about Supreme Will and Thassa's Intervention?
They're modal. You can draw cards and counter spells.
The kid nails it. Adding these 2 cards is essentially like adding 4 cards because they're card draw spells and counter spells. And then we're going to play Memory Lapse as our first counter in the cube to help out control decks and tempo decks, quite frankly. Both are going to want it. We're going to keep this idea going with the next set of cards. Dive Down, Quench, Disdainful Stroke, Divination. Divination, it is great in retail limited, but strong cubes don't want it. And this is where I'm going to start getting a little cheeky with our counter spells and our card draws. You remember I pointed out that Cast Out had cycling? As a matter of fact, so did Hieroglyphic Illumination. We're going to go deeper on that effect. Censor is a counter spell that cycles away, so it's good in the early game and then you cycle it away when you don't need it. Mana Leak is just a great counter spell. I feel like that card is always turned on. 3 mana is just a lot. And then there's Miscalculation, which again, you can counter spells with or cycle it away when it's not good anymore. And then we're going to add just a better cantrip than Divination.
2 mana is better than 3 mana.
See that? That's the kids' math skills. They're on point. We want to keep our cantrips under 3 mana if we can, and so Strategic Planning is a solid card, and importantly, it discards to the graveyard, which will help with the Reanimator decks later. But let's keep pushing. Then there are 2 cards that I want to talk about individually, and that's Exclude. Exclude is just a 3 mana counterspell that says draw a card. I do like the fact that there's upside to this 3 mana counterspell. Drawing a card isn't nothing. And I do like that it's very castable at 3 mana, but 2 of it being colorless. So we're going to keep the idea of fixing our draws or adding value, but we're going to play a more efficient counterspell, and that's Condescend. Condescend lets us scry 2 after we counterspell it, but it's also turned on earlier because you can cast it for blue and 1 or blue and 6, whatever the relevant amount is. And so I like that it scales with the course of the game. Then I want to talk about Artful Dodge. Target creature is unblockable. I guess that's fine for tempo decks, and Flashback is okay, but it's just not going to cut it. Again, we don't really like combat tricks in our cube. So instead, we're going to play a sneaky card. We're going to try out Curator of Mysteries. And guess what this card has?
Cycling.
That's right, cycling. This is technically another cantrip inside our cube, or it's a flying body for decks that need it. And check out that line of text right there in the middle. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, scry 1, we have payoff for our cycling deck. How hilarious is that? Curator of Mysteries is a sneaky card, but I think it's going to be good, especially with as deep as we've gone on cycling inside of blue. Now, that means it's time to check back in with the kid again. Kid, how are we doing on budget?
We spent $8.03 in blue.
That's really very decent. That's a solid amount of money for a lot of upgrades in a very expensive color. Blue doesn't get a Planeswalker. All the reasonable cube blue walkers are just too much money. They're like a fourth of our budget for blue if we include them. So we're going to have to pass on a walker for blue, which is another reason why I went so deep on all the card draw effects. But let's slide on to black. This is the last color for this video. Let's talk about black and what it needs to upgrade. So black is playing a lot of weird 2 mana spells and disruption effects, and they're trying to include this semi-aggro deck. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to try and do some straight upgrades. We're going to turn these cards into solid cards. There is some hand disruption going on here with Ravenous Rat, so stay with me. We're going to upgrade that. I'm not a big fan of Smothering Abomination. I don't want to sack a creature every upkeep, but you'll notice that this is the beginning of them starting to push an Aristocrat-style deck, and I noticed that, and I just want you to hold that in the back of your mind. So we're going to cut all 3 of these cards, obviously, and we're going to turn them into Era Falconwrath, which is a discard outlet for our graveyard decks, Kitesail Freebooter, which is better than the rats because we get choice and it has evasion, and then Gonti is just, I hate to say it like this, he's more fun than the Smothering Abomination, and he gets his value the moment he hits the board. Death Touch isn't nothing, and he's very budget friendly. As we move up the curve, we see cards like Phyrexian Ghoul and Olivia's Dragoon. Now, I did mention that this is an Aristocrat deck, and you see the Sacrifice outlet on the Phyrexian Ghoul, and they are running some Aristocrat payoffs, but they're not able to run things like Blood Artist because they're restricted by budget too. And we don't get Blood Artist either, but we can replace this sacrifice outlet with a better one and then replace the Dragoon with a budget Blood Artist effect. We're going to play Woe Strider and we're going to play Zulaport Cutthroat. Woe Strider is fantastic in aggressive decks, he's fantastic in graveyardy decks, he's great in aristocrat, he's just great, okay? Card is good. And then Zulaport Cutthroat is our Blood Artist that we can afford. One of the next pushes I would make is that if you're going to keep the Aristocrats deck inside the cube, you need to go pick up a copy of Blood Artist. But let's move on to the removal and try and make it more
efficient.
100% efficient. They're playing a lot of subpar effects like Vicious Offering, Final Death as a 5-mana creature removal spell. They're playing Sign in Blood for double black, Bleeding Edge. This is a rough group of cards, and we're just going to upgrade them across the board. We're going to turn Vicious Offering into Liliana's Triumph, which is an edict-based effect that gives us bonuses when we have Liliana Planeswalkers. I know we don't have any, but the cube is going to upgrade over time, and so this will be fine because you can't have a cube and not have Lilies in her. She's amongst the best black Planeswalkers. Most cubes play 2 or 3. Ultimate Price is just way better than a 5-mana removal spell because
2 is less than 5.
There's the kid and his math skills again. I hope y'all are paying attention. Ransack the Lab is better than Sign in Blood because it's easier to cast, you get to see more cards, and it feeds your graveyard. And then Shriek Maw is a great not 5-drop creature. Most of the time you're gonna cast it for its evoke cost, but later in the game you can cast it for 5, and because it's a creature, it's much easier for black to get out of the graveyard and reuse. Now, this cube is playing a Reanimator package, and I can't really fix the Reanimator spells on a budget. That's something I would want to do in the next version of the cube. Entomb, Reanimate, Necromancy, all those cards really blow out our budget if we try to fix them in this first push. But we can fix the other end of our Reanimate package, and that's the middle and top parts of the curb in black. Unfortunately, this is where we're going to have to compromise and play a couple middle of the road cards, and there was just no way around it right here. Black was actually a really hard color for us to try and upgrade. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut these cards. I don't like Rite of Belzenok. I don't want to wait 3 turns for a 6/6 and not have creatures and end up getting punished for it. I'm not a big fan of the Marionette Master because he's slow, and then these top 2 cards are Reanimator targets, I guess. We can do better. So what we're going to do mostly is we're going to lower the curve, and that is we're going to cut these cards and we're going to play black 5s that are better, which gets us away from all the black 6s, and we're going to play Demon of Dark Schemes.
Demon of Dark Schemes is not Griselbrand.
You are very right about that. The problem with trying to fix the top end of our Reanimator package curve and pick our targets is that the Reanimator best targets are really expensive. Griselbrand blows our budget. So we're gonna play Demon of Dark Schemes. Now I have played this card in my cube and he's pretty good. That -2/-2 is kind of relevant, and sometimes you can play him and then cash in his bottom ability all in the same turn, especially if you're reanimating him. But he's going to be serviceable for a while until you can make the big push and pick up those big black top-end curves. You could also play Villas from M20 if you wanted to play him in that slot as well. God Eternal Bantu is fine and fits well with the Aristocrats budget we're running anyway. Sir Conrad is another aristocratic kind of card, milling things to the graveyard and giving us another payoff, and he's fine. He's not great. The card that I'm really disappointed about is Bone Dragon.
Why are you disappointed?
Bone Dragon essentially has escape by exiling 7 other cards from your graveyard, and I've played him in my cube before, and he's not amazing. He's not. But I needed one more threat at this mana cost, one more top end piece, one more, being milled into the graveyard for value kind of card. Honestly, if I was you, CBS, if you're listening, I would spend the $2 and just pick up Doom Whisperer. I would just play Doom Whisperer over Bone Dragon. I would. The problem is we can't scoop up 5-mana Lily or Liliana the Dreadhorde. We don't have those kinds of Planeswalker value threats, and Bone Dragon is going to get cut as you upgrade this cube later, maybe even in your next push. I feel bad about including him, but he is like 10 cents. So he does upgrade the section right out the gate, and then you can replace him later, or you can spend a couple of dollars and go ahead and spring for Doom Whisperer. Now, we did mention that we were trying to have a control deck, and so one of the ways to have a control deck is to splash it into black. Black runs Barter in Blood, where each player sacrifices 2 creatures. That's not normally a big deal for the control deck, so let's try and play a budget board wipe in his place instead. We're going to play Languish. Languish is very, very serviceable in cube. -4/-4 will eat most threats, so that's really solid. And then the cube also plays a 4-mana Blood Artist with Vindictive Vampire, which is meh. You don't really want your Blood Artist effect at 4. So we're going to cut him, and we're going to use a little bit of our budget to get a walker who can stay in our cube for a while. That's also going to help our control decks, and that's Obnixilis Reignited. We can plus him to draw cards, we can -3 and use him as a removal spell, and then he has a game-winning ultimate as well. He's going to get to stick around in our cube for quite a while, and this helps our control deck be in black. So now we've got control pieces in white, black, and blue, which makes our cube a lot more friendly for control decks. Now, let's talk budget. Kid, how are we doing?
You spent $8.68 in black.
Poor black, it actually got the fewest cards of any of the colors that we're going to talk about, but still a lot of upgrades, a lot of efficiency going on in that color now. Now, that's a lot to talk about, so we're actually going to push red, green, multicolored, and colorless into a part 2 of this video. But that gets us to the part where hopefully you've stuck around to hear how we're going to give away a copy of this cube. That's right, I work better when I have the cards in front of me, and so I went ahead and picked up a copy of the Card Kingdom Starter Cube. I just bought the singles, and then I have bought all the cards that I have upgraded into the cube, and so I'm going to give away an upgraded version of this starter cube, and here is how you can enter to win it.
How do you do that?
In the show notes of this video is a link to a GoFundMe. Now, this GoFundMe is very personal to me. I am a transplant patient. I had a kidney transplant. My brother donated me his kidney and saved my life. And I take that issue very personally. As a result, I'm going to host a GoFundMe, and I'm going to donate all the money raised from it to UNC Hospital, which is the place where I got my kidney transplant from, to help patients pay some of their bills. You may not realize it, but having a kidney transplant is really expensive aside from the medical bills. There's the trips to and from the hospital daily afterwards, and paying for parking, and all these little things, they just add up. And so I'm hoping to make just a small donation. Maybe we can help someone make their last few payments, something like that, to UNC Hospital. So follow the link to GoFundMe, click that link, make a donation of $5, and be sure to leave your name, and I will announce the random winner on this channel 2 weeks from today. So that's how you enter to win. I'm going to post details on Twitter, and again, details in the show notes below. Please, please enter to win this cube. It's a good value. It's a nice starter cube. There's a lot of cool pieces in it. I'm going to send the upgraded pieces inside of it, and the money is for a good cause. And let's be honest, you're quarantined, you're home, you don't have anything to do. You might as well help out some patients who are in the hospital. Well, that's going to do it for today, Cubers. Be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things, but more importantly, leave some comments in the show notes below. Leave some stuff for CBS, some other budget cards you think that he could add to his cube and keep in there as he does the rest of his upgrade process. Follow us on the Twitter at cubefortwo. Click the link in the show notes below and enter to win a cube. Can't beat that. And as always, until next time,
Shuffle up and keep cubing, our friends.